learning how to love, learning how to love. I'm learning how to love, learning how to love, learning how to love. Oh, I'm new to loving you. Can you help me through my shyness and my pain? If you open up your door, I'll step in. I'm sure there's only love to gain. I'm learning how to love. I'm learning how to love. Oh, and if you felt a lack, perhaps I held some back. Try to understand. I'm learning how to live, learning how to give. I'm learning how to love my fellow man. I'm learning how to love. I'm learning how to love. I'm learning how to love. Learning how to love. And when you let me in, then we can begin. Let's start the miracle. When you let me in, then we can begin. Let's start the miracle of love. Of love. Learning how to love, learning how to love. I'm learning how to love. And if I was too much, damaging your trust, try to understand. I'm learning how to live, learning how to give. I'm learning how to love.
That was Jaiya Earthschild singing a song about learning how to love. And that's what our show today is about. Our show is about the loves of Nimma, who is the ancestress of us all. And we'll find out how that came to be. Nimma is from the planet Nibiru, who started sending a gold mining expedition to Earth about 450,000 years ago. About 440,000 years ago, her father sent her to join the gold mining expedition from Nibiru to Earth. She was to be the chief medical officer, and as soon as she arrived, she had to deal with the two guys who had been her problem back on Nibiru. And here to tell us all about that, from the perspective of Nimma, is the Anunnaki scholar, Janet Kiralessin. She speaks as Nimma. Nimma, and I'm going to interview her. Can you sort of tell us just what happened, first of all, between you and Leal on Nibiru, and then what happened between you and Enlil, who became the commander, or Yahweh. What happened between you and Enlil when you got to Earth? So both on Nibiru and on Earth.
Hi. Thank you for having me on the show today. Well, back in Nibiru, I was engaged to marry my beloved Enki, and I fell in love with two men. What can I say? Enlil was our brother. We were half siblings to each other. We all shared the same father, Anu. And while we were there on our home planet of Nibiru, I was captivated by Enlil. He was very seductive. I guess what you would say here on Earth, it was kind of like a date rape.
Did you already have a relationship with Enki before you started relating to Enlil?
Well, I loved Enki.
Weren't you engaged to him?
To Enki. We weren't. We were close. There was some distance because he was so in his head and he was busy all the time. So I was alone a lot. And I think, looking back, that was what made this happen with Enlil and myself, is that he noticed I was alone, and Enki was busy solving problems for the planet. We were facing the destruction of our whole planet, and our species was becoming infertile and unable to make children, to breed, and our planet's atmosphere was disappearing, and there was the devastation of the crops, and the whole climate was changing, much like you Earthlings are experiencing right now. We don't seem to learn. So here we are in Earthling form, and same thing's happening again. So those things were happening on Nibiru, and Enki was with the council. He was a chief scientist. He was very intelligent. He was even more intelligent than most Anunnaki. He was like what you would call your Einstein or your Tesla. And so, I loved him, and I was very loyal to him and dedicated to him. I'll just say I was a human being, because Anunnaki are human, and you humans can relate to that. I was very human. And I was young. I was lusty. I needed attention. I was looking back on myself in those days. I was pretty haughty and arrogant. I was the daughter of the king, and I was so full of myself. And there was this very handsome young man, Enlil, and he was the son of the king. And before I knew it, we were off making love in secret, and I became pregnant. So that was frowned upon. Let us say, Father Anu was not in the least bit happy with what happened, and he, you don't want to be alone with Father Anu, and he forbid me forever marrying, and he was screaming at Enlil as well, and we were both what's called blackened. We were shunned, shamed, blackened. Many of our rights and privileges were removed, and but nevertheless, the gift from that union was his wonderful son, Ninurta, who I grew to love very much, and Enlil was involved with the boy's childhood as well. So anyway, that's pretty much what happened there. But do you want to go?
Well, so then you get sent to help out with the gold mining expedition, and I know that you stopped on Mars on the way and made the statue at Cydonia for Alalu, who had died there, and you left men for Anzu to make a Mars base, and then you went on to Sharupat and to places in Iraq, basically, that were under the control of Enlil, who is now the commander, and he's the first. He hustles you again when you get to Earth. What was that like for you when you reunioned with him?
Well, I had just restored my relationship with my father, and we had a big ceremony, a ritual where he basically. It's kind of like your Camelot, which is these are all reflections of what we did in Nibiru, and so I went up a giant staircase going up to like a pyramidal type form, and Father Anu stood at the top, and there were the birdmen and all the mass that had gathered to send us off on this journey. Enlil and Enki and Alalu and all that. We talked about those in other shows, but they had already come to Earth, and there'd been a lot of history and many, many years there. And they decided to send myself and 50 other, primarily women. It was mostly women, a few staff that were men. And we came to the Earth to be the medical corps, to bring higher civilization to the Earthlings, to the Anunnaki they weren't Earthlings yet, they were the Anunnaki who were residing on Earth. And, they wanted things. They wanted beers and wines, elixirs and sacraments and other food types. They were, missing the things that we had here. And they wanted, just some luxuries. They were very primitive conditions.
You're an expert on growing psychoactive plants and theogens
and not only that, but determining what the value of plants were. What were their properties. I'm a chemist and alchemist, and I can determine this can be used for food. This has nutritional value. This has medicinal value. This has psychoactive properties. This is poisonous. Don't eat this. So I would go and evaluate myself and my staff these different plants, and so that's part of what happened later. But we're getting ahead of ourselves.
Yeah. So you rocket down after you go to Mars. You land at in the Persian Gulf. What happens next?
Well, of course. I'm going to step back a step. I had a lot of time to reflect, and I was listening to these Emmys that Enki had sent me. And Enki never really stopped being infatuated with me and loving me. We always loved each other. The Anunnaki are not traditionally monogamous, but I had a very extremely powerful love for Enki. And when I started to listen to his communications that he had sent to me, which were for me to listen while on board ship, I had a lot of time to reflect and, just go into a meditative state and look at my life and what I had done, the mistakes I'd made, and what I wanted to correct it. And when I was listening to these Emmys or tapes, you would call them, or DVDs or CDs or whatever they were mostly audio, I just felt deeper and deeper in love with Enki. I felt the emotions that I had towards him throughout my childhood and life previous. We were always engaged from the moment I was born, and so I loved him. I think what happened, why I fell into the arms of Enlil, was that just this huge lack of interaction with each other. There's proximity and interaction which enables emotions to grow stronger and to maintain. So that's why we drifted apart. But the love was still there, and he at this time had married Marduk through Damkina, who he married in a political marriage to Alalu's daughter, etc., etc. So all this stuff was between us, and yet while I was listening to these Emmys, I just fell deeper and deeper in love with Enlil. And so with Enki. So I had made this determination on board to reestablish my connection. I didn't know how it was going to look or turn out, but just reestablish my connection with Enki. I was excited. It's like, we're going to be away from Dad, from Father, and we're going to be away from all the politics of Nibiru. And I don't know. I had this fantasy that things could unfold.
But Enlil took you over when you first arrived.
Yeah, and I still have these emotions for Enlil. I can't help myself. He's charming. He's seductive. So there I landed, and I felt very conflicted between the two of them. And I admit, I kind of, whoever's treated me nicest, I went towards, and so I waffled. And so we have a long history of us going back and forth, and, we're siblings, and we fight, and we're just like human beings, and we make up and kiss, and making up often involves make-up sex, and children came from those things, and lots of drama and trauma, just like normal human people. But, so when I landed, Enlil, of course they both wanted to have children and more children by me, because I was the highest ranking female, and there's this ranking system that determines who gets to rule, who gets to inherit and rule. So, of course, they wanted to have children. So there was genuine, though. Our emotions were genuine, and this desire to breed and create children that had the highest ranking. So if we should die or decide to step down, our children would rule, and then our grandchildren, and so forth. So that's kind of the underpinnings of what was behind my thoughts, ideas, and emotions at the time.
Well, I got some different stories when I read about what happened between you and Enlil. And Enki, in the Lost Book of Enki, just sort of just said that indicated that your sex wasn't successful. What in the world did happen?
Well, as I started, getting down to it with Enlil, I had fallen in love with Enki. So what does falling in love mean? It's a deeper state of emotional connection, and there's this proclivity towards monogamy in those moments. And mono meaning one, and gammas, marriage. I'd say it was the desire to just be with the beloved, the twin flame, that romantic love. So we have a romantic love concept, and we have a political love concept, and we do have love, and but our feelings probably aren't as intense as human beings who are more empathetic, but we have the capacity to fall in love just like human beings, and I had fallen in love with Enki. So when I tried to be with Enlil, and of course you have to realize Enki had Damkina, so there was I wasn't quite sure what that relationship was like. We were feeling it through, and so I tried to make love with Enlil, but it wasn't very successful. He wasn't able to perform very well because I wasn't sending out the signal, because my heart and soul wasn't with it. And so we had a fight, and then, like I said earlier, we fight, and there, just waiting in the wings is Enki. Come with me, beloved, come with me to the Absu, come with me to my place that I've built for you.
But Enlil had promised you, as part of courting you, that he was going to bring Ninurta to Earth. When you went off with Enki, did that make him change his mind about Ninurta?
Well, that was a factor. I wanted my son to come to Earth. Enlil is the commander, the commander of the Earth, and so that was part of the factor. He did honor his word and bring Ninurta here, and Father Anu also wanted Ninurta to come. Poor Ninurta was back there on Nibiru without a mother or father, and he was kind of lost, And he's young and impressionable, and he needed my influence. He needed his father's influence, and he actually grew very close with Enki, and so he needed the children that were closer in age to him rather than his grandfather, who was much older and didn't really relate that well on that level. He was more of a figurehead and didn't relate that well to the grandchildren. So we eventually all came into alignment to getting Ninurta here, and so Ninurta was on the way. Plus we needed strong individual people, characters, personalities here to take up the different parts of our society that was forming, and Ninurta was our warrior. He was a very strong, he's young, and he liked to do those things. So he was our warrior.
Yeah. So you and Enki went off to an estate of his called Dilmun?
Yes. I'll read you something. I won't read it word for word, but I'm going to give you an overview. So we journeyed to his place, which was called Dilmun, and this land was very pure and clean and green and bright, and it was they called the land of the living, the garden of the great gods, and it was an earthly paradise. It was located east of Eden, and it became my home where I would live for a season during the wheel of the year. And when I got there, it was very, very romantic. Enki took me by the shoulders, and I turned to meet him and face him, and then, we kissed. It was very passionate, and it was like this incredible reunion, like a deep well. And my soul was swallowed up, and I fell into him. And the Anunnaki are very tantric. When we make love, we can go all the way to source. So this was really my first experience being with what I realized was truly my twin flame. And when we kissed, my chakras just ignited, and I felt like I was on fire. And Enki said to me, "You are still my beloved." And it was very romantic. He lifted me off my feet and carried me to my bed, and we made love, and time stood still as we became one, and we were one with each other and all beings, the universe, and God, source, and all the way up to the creator of all. And when we were making love, I saw that we had always been one with each other. We were twin flames. We truly were twin flames. And we've been one throughout eternity, and through many lifetimes, and throughout all time. We made love for hours, and with each orgasm I had, I thought I had peaked, but we kept going. It was the most amazing thing. We just reached higher and higher plateaus. And then eventually we collapsed. We were exhausted, but we would rest for a while and make love again and again and again. And we did this for, I don't know, it seemed like days or weeks. I lost touch with time and space. And at one point he said to me, I could feel like my egg had come down and was ready, and I really wanted to conceive. And he, as he ejaculated, he said, "Give me a son! Give me a son!" And his seed entered my womb, and I got pregnant. I could feel it right away. So I had a daughter. Her name was Nisar, Nisar, and I gave birth in a stone house that Enki had built us. And then we were very passionate, and over time I got pregnant again, and we had another daughter, Gestiana. But here's where our first, we're just like other dysfunctional humans. He was very disappointed that I was only bearing girls. And that was part of our societal thing. By this time, at one point in time, men and women were equal, but because of the wars and the overabundance of women in comparison to men, the men started taking concubines and, more than one wife, and women gradually got devalued, even royal women. And so by this time, male children were much revered and desired. And so he wanted to, make another child. And I felt his disappointment, and it was like a big barrier came down between us. And I just said, I got to get back to Sharupik, and my other female doctors, since experiments had been left on hold there, and I need to take a look at everything. I need space. I need time out. I wanted to reflect on our relationship. And so I left, and I said, take good care of our daughters, and they're going to grow really fast. And Ninsar was already almost fully grown. There was something about the environment on the Earth that children grew up faster than they did on Nibiru. It took years, Earth years, and years. And while I was away at Sharupik, Enki stayed in Dilmun, and he was there with our daughters. And he started, working hard. He developed the irrigation systems and springs and rivers and lakes and ponds. And one day he saw Ninsar. He didn't really pay a lot of attention to children. They have all kinds of people that teach them their lessons and, help them with their life. And he came upon her, and he had been away from her for a while and didn't realize how she had grown, and she had become a radiant young adult. And Ninsar looks like me. It looks very much like me. And Enki is, of course, obsessed with me. But I was away, and I didn't give him any indication of when I'm coming back, so he went over and overwhelmed Ninsar with his charm and made love with her. But he, after a short time, found her to be a pale portrait of me, who was his beloved, and so he basically dumped her. And she was very, very hurt. And she was, of course, now pregnant. And she gave birth to a girl named Ninkura, who is known as the goddess of the mountain pastures. But, of course, Enki was disappointed because another girl. And he wants boys. He's obsessed with boys. If he can't have me and he can't have he wants to have me and his sons. He has this whole vision of how life would be perfect. So, of course, Ninsar was left grieving, and Enki left her and their daughter Ninkura. But Ninkura, grew up very fast in record time. And she liked to climb mountains for her play. And years passed, Earth years passed, but for the Anunnaki it's just days. And Enki eventually happened upon her, because he was in charge of all these water systems and developing the land and making it into a true garden. And he happened upon Ninkura. And of course she looks very much like her mother, who looks very much like me, and he became very excited and seduced her. And he took her, Enki can be very, very seductive and romantic. And so they made love for 9 days and 9 nights, and of course Ninkura became pregnant, and she gave birth to, of course, a girl named Uttu, U-T-T-U, Uttu. Okay, so do you have any questions?
No, what happened with this grandchild, great-grandchild now?
Right, so now we have many generations, and Enki is the father of all these children. And so I came back, Earth years had passed, and I came back. Of course, I couldn't stay away. These are my children, but I saw that everybody was sad, and Enki was avoiding me, and so I warned Uttu, who was my, great-granddaughter. Great-granddaughter by now. And I said to her, never let Enki get you alone. And, of course, children never listen to their elders, and she found him to be very sexy, and she had sex with him, and he dumped her. But she was not very far along, and she didn't want to carry the child. So I, created an elixir which made the seed expel, and then we buried it in the earth, and we did a ritual, and with this seed, this child, it wasn't very far along. It was pretty early on. So we said, you bury the promise of a child you would have created with Enki, Mother Earth, in whose bosom we bury. Let the earth receive the seed that you and Enki created and transform it. So, and then of course time passed, and Enki returned, and we forgot all about it. He was all happy and carefree, and he brought with him his friend, his vizier and friend, Ismud, who's known as the two-faced god. And they came upon this experimental garden. We used this area to plant a bunch of different seeds to see what would come up that we had gathered. And so no one was supposed to go into it. But I don't know, Enki doesn't obey. So he entered, and Ismud cut samples of the plants for Enki to taste. And of course Enki lacked respect and restraint. And I was angry when I found out, because he had taken over my maidens, and then he took over my garden. And so I went to him, sad, I, the great mother, mistress, and supreme queen of the earth, am totally outraged and absolutely furious at your disdain for all beings, human or plants. And I said, Enki, you've gone too far. Taking over the heart's essence of young goddesses was bad enough. But now you're also eating 8 primeval samples of the plant world, and that is far too much. And I also said to him, I acknowledge it's good to feel desire and experience that intense need to be with the divine beloved. But there's a profound responsibility when you fall in love and captivate someone's heart, mind, body, and soul. And I love Enki, and I took his face in my hand, and I looked at him very closely, and I said, you, dear heart, came out of the blue into many young maidens' lives, and you set yourself up like a squatter in their hearts, capturing them only to leave them, never to return. And so this is what gets interpreted in the later writings as a curse. But, I was mad. And I stepped back and said, for all of this, you deserve a mighty lesson. And it's time that you, Enki, learn in sorrow that which you did not learn in happiness. And from this day on, I will never look at you with a life-giving eye. May the suffering you inflicted upon others return to you threefold. My face, the face of life, as long as I live, shall you not see again. And boy, he was devastated, because I was it for him, and I loved him, and but I still had this need to protect myself because of what had happened with Father and my shunning and my blackening and all that. I admit I had my own wounds. So looking back, I had lost it. And at that time I turned and walked away, and I felt conflicted and uncomfortable, that I lost control, and I spewed forth those funny, ugly words of intense anger. And then I was reflecting, did I really mean that? And at that moment, I did. I didn't care what Enki thought or felt or did. I only knew that I needed to get far away. I just needed time out. So I left. I went back to I went back to the mountains near where we had our facilities where we had our original lab, and I told everybody, don't look for me. And I went on a sabbatical. I went up into a place I knew to be my sanctuary, and I needed time to reflect and meditate and pray and connect with my soul and connect back to source. But unbeknownst to me, soon after I left, Enki's health began. He got very sick. He began to fail, and he developed a strange affliction which caused 8 organs of his body to start to shut down. And he was getting sicker and sicker. He grew progressively ill. And the organs were dying in his body. And Enki was suffering horrendously. And they called back to Nibiru, to the Anunnaki great gods were called. And they called all these healers, and all were disconsolate with Enki's ailments. And Father Anu, the Sky Lord, was contacted, and Enlil, his brother, he's called the Lord of the Air, and all the healer gods and goddesses were called, and they tried everything, and nothing helped. And they eventually came to realize that the only one that could help them is me, Nimma. And they couldn't find me, because I went to a secret place that I didn't let anybody know where it was. I just wanted a time out, and I didn't know what was going on back there. So anyway, Enki's health was deteriorating, and finally they sent this guy named the Fox.
That was a girl.
Oh, it was a girl. I'm sorry. And they found me. And at that point, I had come down to the lab. They found me because I had come back to the lab. And I have these assistants I'm training, and I have experiments going, and I'm teaching, and so I came back down. So I thought about it immediately. I said, of course, and, I love Enki. So I went down back home. But, on the way down I was going, why was I so angry at him? I just wanted something for myself. I had everything taken away from me. I had been relegated to a 5 in the listings of numerical value. And I'd once been very high up there, and now I was just a 5. Everybody was 50, 60s, and I'm a 5 in the ranking. And, when I thought about it, everybody would have to die on both worlds before I get a chance to rule. So I'm never going to be anything really important in this hierarchy, patriarchal system. Yeah, so I wanted to roll beside Enki, and I would be totally content to sit beside Enki, and, I'm smart. He values me. He does love me. And the two of us could have done it. We could have been one hell of a team, solving all the problems and making decisions, and we have a council and savants, and we'd have a lot of time for ourselves. So I was thinking that I'm here in a strange world, and I'm doing the best I can to find myself and my purpose in being, and I'm smart, and my work is rewarding, and I do have so much, and I am the princess, and many adore me. But there's still something missing, a blank spot, a hole in the fiber of my being. And it does take over center stage and consumes me. It makes me feel miserable. So I was keeping busy, avoiding things and escaping, and I wasn't pursuing my true heart's desires. And I was mad because Enki doesn't have the slightest respect for me and my property on one hand. And that was my experiment, and my science is my art, and it's my true passion. It's what I own. It's something that's purely mine, my niche, my specialty. And I have a feminine approach to art and science. And I realized that I didn't know. I didn't know the destinies of those plants. I didn't know what they were, if they were poisonous or not. And I didn't know if there were severe adverse side effects. And I thought, I was so angry at Enki. Well, how could he be so foolish consuming untried plants from a strange world? I was just furious at him because I didn't know if I could save him. So the fox came, and she told me what's going on, and I had told her I'd never want to see Enki again, but despite all, I ran back to the center, and I got the first guy bird available, and I flew to Enki's side. And as soon as I got there, I got off the craft, and I ran past everyone, and they just opened the doors, and I just ran, and I went to Enki's chamber, and he looked pale and lifeless, and I just turned around, and there were all these people hovering around him, and I dismissed everybody, all the healers, nurses, all the well-wishers, everybody is like, out. And so I examined Enki, and he was very weak, and his breath was shallow, and I knew what I had to do on the core level because I was his beloved. So I leaned forward, and I just wrapped my arms and legs and body and breasts. And I wrapped around his body, and I completely enveloped him, and eventually he responded, and he very weakly whispered, "My whole body hurts." So I went into this zone with him, and I sent warmth spreading all over his body with healing energy and vitality and life force, and I kept sending it into him night and day. And eventually he responded and healed and got healthier. And of course I got fluids into him and my mixed herbs and elixirs, and I just tried this and that because I really didn't know exactly what was going on, but I just went into my instinctual self and did everything I could. And eventually healed to the point where we were able to make love again. And the making love process of going into the oneness and tantric union and reconnecting to source was part of that healing that he needed. And once again, I conceived the child, and the child was born. So I had a series of children. For the pain that grew at the top of Enki's head, I gave birth to the god Abu, who became known as the king of the grasses, master of plants. When a child is born, we assign them their destiny, because we want them to have what right livelihood, what they are supposed to do. For the pain in the locks of Enki's hair, I gave birth to the god Nin Sakila, or Nin Tula, who became the lord of Magan.
I would just like to say, Nimma, it's like, I know that you Anunnaki did not call yourselves gods. You're sort of using the Sumerians' word for the Anunnaki.
Right. Well, we were gods. It was just a distinction between. Well, at that point, the humans weren't there, so
exactly.
Yeah.
So that I know that the Anunnaki beseeched the Creator of all, and they knew damn well they weren't gods.
Uh-huh.
So I think you've just adopted the language of the Earthlings there.
Right. I'm filtering it down through the human language, but these were, I guess, it would be more accurate to say the Lord, because there was a ruling class.
Mm-hmm.
So all these children were lords, gods and goddesses, which meant they were higher ranking than. There were only about 1,000 Anunnaki on the earth, and so these were just had higher ranking. The children of the top two ranking male and females in existence at that time were the lords and what's the female lords and ladies and lords, but. The word God at that time just meant the ruling class. And so then for the pain in the nose, I gave birth to the goddess Nibiru, or Ninsrutu, and she was to marry Ninazu. And for the pain in Enki's mouth, I birthed the goddess Ninkasi, who shall be known as that which satisfies the heart, she who sates the thirst. And for the pain in Enki's throat, I gave birth to the goddess Nazi, who was destined to marry Nindara. And for the pain in his arm, I birthed the goddess Azumo, who shall marry Ningjishida. And for the pain in his ribs, I birthed the goddess Ninti, which means lad of the rib, and the one who makes life, and I think it's lady of the rib, I'm sorry, I'm misreading my own notes. The one who makes life, and she shall become the lady of the month. And for the pain in his limbs, I bore the god Enchag, who become the lord of Dilmun Tumun. So I gave birth to all these children. I did have some boy children, you noticed. And this was the process it took to heal Enki so that he could be self-sufficient and survive. It took many years. So this was a long process, and yet he's still with us to this day. And we loved all the children we created, and we knew that Father really hadn't officially sanctioned these children, and they had no ranking in his system that had been devised for the rulers and kingship of Nibiru and the earth. And while ranking may be important for some, Enki and I loved these children equally and wanted to make certain that they had destinies worthy of their bloodline. So, Father Anu at that point still did not sanction our union and recognize the children and any children who would spring from our lovemaking. And we knew the fates could be fickle and destinies change, and thus, with that in mind, we planned for our children to lead, learn, rule, and marry, and have the best possible future within our power to instill upon them. What else would you like to ask?
You're doing great. Let me understand this thing about how long it takes to make a baby gestate here. on Earth versus Nibiru? It's a little mixed up.
Well, we noticed that the gestation process was different than on Nibiru. And for each month on Earth, it was as a day on Nibiru. So for 9 months, which are 9 days of Nibiru time, so basically 9 Nibiru days, I would give birth to a child.
So every 9
Earth.
days you have a child.
But these are 9 Nibiru days. And each Nibiru day was equal to 9 Earth months.
Ah.
And so for each of Enki's 8 elements, I gave birth to a child. So I spent, basically you can calculate this way, 9 Earth months times 8 children for a total of 72 Earth months carrying, then birthing these children. And this wasn't back to back, there was time in between. So I was doing a birthing children and healing for losses, beloved Enki, for over 6 Earth years. So it probably would be, equivalent to about 9 or 10 or even 15 years, because I wasn't pregnant back to back. There was time in between. But I couldn't take any real breaks from this process because I didn't want him falling ill again. So I just kept going with this process until it was over and he was healed. And, I love my children and took care of them too. And at the end, he was free from all pain and suffering, and his body had no more aches or pains, and he was revitalized. He was stronger than ever before. And each birth of a child symbolized my divine love for him. And that was part of the process. He didn't feel loved when I had rejected him. And even his rejection of the children, it was all symbolic of what was going on inside of him. He didn't feel loved. And so he finally confessed at the end of this process, when I made love with the other maidens, it was you I longed for. I wanted your embrace before I wanted you for me only, and still desired all the maidens. For I knew not the extent of my longing for you and only you. So he had a wandering eye, but he realized that through all this process that I was his one true beloved. And yet, for those who don't know the story, and we will tell it in future chapters, and we'll keep repeating this, the Anunnaki are not monogamous. And there were so few of them that part of their duty to the continuing of the Anunnaki species was to diversify their gene pool and to create children with other Anunnaki, and eventually, in a future story, the human beings that were created.
I would just say that it sounds like at the same time as they're diversifying, they're also focusing on less diversity within the royal lineage itself, because they have this incestuous custom.
Well, that's all part of hybrid vigor, but it's also reinforcing characteristics and qualities that they want to reinforce. And they were so obsessed with their line and making sure it was their children. But I think that's why Father Anu was so angry at me when I look back at it, when I made love with and had a child with Enlil, is because we had the same mother and father. And so that was two, while the Anunnaki are incestuous, they married their half sibling. So they marry, the child typically has different mothers, same father. And that helps with this diversification of the gene pool. So that was part of why he was so angry, because they were really concerned about certain impurities coming through the children. But the Anunnaki have all of their DNA turned on, so they're basically very healthy people with naturally extremely long lifespans. And they have full capacity of their brains. Human beings have 256 strands of DNA that are turned off, and they control a lot of the abilities that and this is a later story, that we didn't want humans to have at that time.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Nimma. We look forward to our next conversation with you. This has been an episode of Nimma's Story on Aquarian Radio. You've just heard Janet Kira-Lesson speaking for Nimma, and she is the author of an upcoming book which is called Nimma, the Mother of Humanity. It should be out sometime this year, and you've got to get this book.
You call this love, this trembling emotion. It looks like pain, though I'm touched by your devotion. You come to me, your heart in your hand, torn from your breast. Though never by love's command, I've heard this now from many different aching souls. I've felt it too. We all get to play sometimes the painful roles in the drama and the dance, the risk of life's romance. But isn't there another word to use? Love is not a game. Love is not a game. To win or lose. Once in a while, I have felt my heart spill over, explode in space, a radiant supernova. And then I don't care if I'm alone at all. The earth could melt and the sun could fall. When the chariot of God I ride, deep inside. You call this love. You call this love.